Welcome everybody to the second stakeholder workshop of the joint European Commission and ESOs Task Force on timely European standards for a green and digital single and global market. My name is Giovanni Collot. I work for Senelec, and it is my pleasure to be your moderator today for this important event. This is the second workshop because the first one was held on the 16th of November. And today will be an opportunity for our speakers and panelists to go through a bit the progress that the task force has made and analyze a bit what still needs to be done. It is my pleasure to have here with me today at the Senelec headquarters in Brussels the two co-chairs of the task force. So Elena Santiago-Cid, Director General of Senelec, and Gwen Kosigou, Director of DG Grow Directorate H at the European Commission. Just before we start, just two very quick technical points. The first one is for our panelists. Since we have our colleague Alberto here who is managing the slides for the whole process, please, if you need your slide to go on, if you need your presentation to be changed, you can just, while speaking, say, next slide, please, and it will be taken care of. And second thing, for all the participants who are listening to us, feel free to add questions through the Q&A. You should be able to find the Q&A at the end of the screen. And we will take them on during the, there are two specific slots allotted for reactions and open discussion. So I will pose them to our panelists. That said, I'm happy to give the floor to our two co-chairs for the introduction and some opening words to this webinar. When do you want to start?
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you, and actually I think it's a very good timing actually for everybody to know what we are cooking together, Elena and myself and our respective teams, and also to get your ideas or your views on various things. It's also a possibility for me to update you on the strategy that was recently adopted, and actually to stress the need between those two exercises, the strategy and what we're trying to do in the task force. As you know, the Commission is very much committed to the European standardization system, and actually we reaffirm that commitment in the strategy. Basically, standardization for us is key, at least for two things. Has been key for two things in the past, and it still is. The realization of the single market and its functioning, on one hand, and the competitiveness of industry while respecting, the interests of the societal stakeholders, consumers, unions, SMEs, environmental objectives as well. We've got another challenge now, which we used to call the twin transition, which is actually a bit more complex than that, which is the twin transition, green, digital, but also resilience. And I think in the difficult times we live through today, resilience is definitely coming also at the top of the agenda. And I think standardization can definitely help us in doing that. When you look what we've been doing in batteries, for example, what we're now launching with hydrogen, that will be quite key as well for our policy objectives. So we're very committed to the European standardization system. The strategy reaffirms it, but this being said, we've got challenges, and I'll come back in the first panel on strategy to explain a bit what those challenges and what we intend to do in order to meet them is foreseen. But before we launch the strategy, we already were conscious that all that will only function if our system functions well. And we were both with Elena and our colleagues and stakeholders aware that there are things to be fixed. And that's what we've been trying to do with the task force. And therefore, I'm delighted that we can tell you about the progress we've made, the work that we still have ahead of us, and also to receive your views. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to host in the Sense Analytic Management Center the second workshop in order to, I think we stick to our promises, and I'm very proud to say that because the 16th of November, we saw that there was a lot of appetite to get information about the progress that our joint task force was making, and it could not be just one single thought. So we agreed to continue with this exchange of information and also to get your input, which is extremely important for the work that we are doing together. I'm very grateful to Wen that accepted to join us here physically so that we can have a hybrid meeting, which makes things a little bit easier. And maybe at one occasion we can even have a physical meeting so that we can all meet and also have a lively discussion. It is very important for the European standards organizations to be able to engage with the European Commission first for this specific task force, because as Wen was saying, we identified some very, very relevant challenges. And for us, and this is a shared goal, standards bring a very important value to the single market, but also for the competitiveness of the European industry and the European economy. And this is really the base of the European standardization system, to get our stakeholders engaged, to get our stakeholders motivated, to get them understanding the process, and also to get a process that is efficient and that is effective. And this is what we are trying to do actually in the task force, to work on the processes that we have in place, to understand one another better, to improve the communication, to clarify some of the aspects that maybe because we were not communicating enough, were not that clear, and to help each and every one of us to work on a very straightforward process that can get timely European standards for the green and digital single and global market. So welcome everybody. And I think that I will start now introducing how the Senelec and ETSI community has received the European Standardization Strategy. And to do that, I will have the cooperation of Nediana Nikolowski, who is the chair of the ETSI General Assembly. I don't know, Giovanni, if you would like to add something, because I'm also taking your
No, it's good, please go ahead.
So, well, if you allow us, let's go to the first panel, because I think that it would be interesting that we give the ESO's view, and then of course you can introduce the European Commission idea and motivation also for the strategy. So if we can go to the so these are the things. Okay. So first of all, I need to say that for the ESOs, we have received very well the European Standardization Strategy. We think that I said not so long ago, it was about time to get the standardization activities at the right strategic level. And this is what we believe that the standardization strategy has done. It has been a wake-up call for us, for SENS and ELEC, for ETSI, but also, and I think this is very important, for the SENS, ELEC, and ETSI experts, and in general to all potential experts that should be or can be working on the standardization activities, and they are not doing that so. And it's very important that we have got expertise in the standardization community, in the European standardization community, understanding the values, understanding the processes, and helping us to deliver according to expectations. So very important communication, very important strategy that it was already somehow developed by other regions of the world. and we had a very strong system. The European standardization model has been very strong for years, and now we can actually utilize the marriage between policy on standardization and standardization activities in a way that will serve the resilience of the European economy. So next slide. I will. This is very interesting because when the European Standardization Strategy was published, we at CEN and CENELEC and also ETSI, we had a look to, okay, we agreed, we approved our strategy 2030 already a couple of years ago in CEN and CENELEC case, and it is very consistent. So the 5 strategic goals that we can find in the CEN and CENELEC strategy 2030 are very well reflected in the European Standardization Strategy. So this is already a very important aspect because what we did was identify, of course, when we'll elaborate, I think, further on the actions that have been included. But for us, it was very important to ensure the consistency. So first point, we are on the same wavelengths and we have the same ambitions for the standardization activities and community. So in the CEN and CENELEC strategy 2030, we know that there is a first one that is related to the recognition by the European Union in the EFTA of the strategic value of European standardization. And we have ticked the box because the communication is absolutely recognizing the value and actually trying to even strengthen that strategic value in the single market. So there are several activities that we are currently developing in the CEN and CENELEC community. I would like to mention a couple, but there is several projects that are ongoing. One of them, of course, is our participation in the task force that we will further elaborate later. But 2 years ago, we started to work on a project to connect European standards with the Sustainable Development Goals. And that is an exercise that has been also, it's been doing by ISO and IC. And what we are doing now is really to focus that relation with the green and digital transition. So our objective will be, if possible, before the end of 2022, to have a mechanism that identify the European standards, not the standards, not only the ones that are published, but also those that are under development or those initiatives that land on the CEN and CENELEC table with the digital and green transition, so that we can have a good understanding of how the European standardization community support these important objectives for the European economy. We have got a second goal in the CEN and CENELEC strategy that is that our customer and stakeholders benefit from the digital solutions. So I think that those that know me can understand that this is very close to my heart, because I do believe that the economy is digital. I don't think that there is a differentiation anymore. And we have been working very hard in the CEN and CENELEC community for our own digital transformation, to be able to address user needs. And there is a significant number of projects in the CEN and CENELEC community addressing online standardization development, machine interpretable standards, or what we call smart standards, all that coordinated with ISO and IC. And this morning we had an extremely interesting meeting where I am very proud to say that we are making very good progress in all these initiatives. Then what is also very important for us, and this is also reflected in the standardization strategy of the Commission, is that we are able to address user needs. And to do that, to address user needs, we need to understand the user needs. This is an exercise that we have been doing for many years, but in 2022 in particular, we have initiated a specific project where we are going to ask our user and stakeholders for requirements that they are expecting from our digital solutions that we can also incorporate in our standards, so that at the end of the day, our digital projects are addressing specific needs. And my idea here is also to connect that with the 14 ecosystems of the industrial policy. So we have the 14 ecosystems of the industrial policy, where there is a diversity of sectors that are addressed. Those sectors have got specific requirements that need to be addressed, and we need to address those requirements in our delivery of European standards. Again, this is something that has been reflected in the communication of the Commission, and that we would like to elaborate and share with our European partners. We have the fourth objective of the Sense and Make strategy, that is mainly, if I may say, I will just summarize, related to inclusiveness. Well, this is one of the uniqueness of our system. I think that Gwen has mentioned the competitiveness, it has mentioned the single market. From a very operational perspective, I always like to say, from the Sense and Elect and EC, the ESOs, what we produce are European standards that are adopted. So it's the full technical harmonization in Europe, and this is what differentiates our system from other systems in the world, but also the inclusiveness. So the fact that we make a lot of efforts to get in our system all the stakeholders, small, big enterprises, academia, researchers, societal stakeholders, and more small and medium-sized enterprises. So again, a very important aspect that has been reflected in our strategy, and that is reflected in the communication strategy. I think here I also would like to thank the Commission for the emphasis that they have made on education. This is something that is not that in the Sense and Elect case it's forgotten, it's very important, but there is subsidiarity in Europe, there is not so many education programs that are addressing standardization, and we believe that if we go for a standardization strategy with a strategic dimension, it is extremely important to work with the skills, the competencies, and to build on young professionals that can contribute to the system, and that need to be orchestrated. And indeed, the cutting edge with innovation is key. There, I think that we have made significant progress in the last years. Putting science into standards is one of the examples that is placed on the communication, and we are very proud of that. We will have our next Putting Science into Standards even next week. And there we will address organ on chip, but we had some on quantum technology not so long ago. And we had one on hydrogen. And I'm very proud to say that, because that took place some years ago, but indeed it proved that we can anticipate. And now anticipation and orchestration will help us to be even more efficient in addressing the market needs. And finally, it's important to always connect with the international dimension. We always say we don't want Europe to be a fortress Europe. For the European standardization system, our connections with and commitment to the international standardization community is very strong. We believe that we can influence and be front runners in those technologies where we have the capacity and the skills to do that. We have the instruments to get there. We understand we need to coordinate our approach much better. And I don't think that I can say that we are not scared, because we can do that. And while getting European values and requirements to the international arena, we can get international standards with a very right market access. And this is what is going also to influence the competitiveness of our industry. And this is our strategy. And it's a very nice marriage, as you can see. And I'm going to give the floor to Neviana. She's going to now connect in the, not this, but the next slide, the connections of the EC strategy with the European standardization one.
Thank you very much, Elena. And as you said, we are on the same wavelength. So our societies, both at the European and global level, are faced with economic and societal challenges, such as sustainable development, modernization, aging population, and social cohesion. So digital technology is part of the solution to these challenges, as you said, and the introduction of digital technology into economic and societal processes is becoming increasingly pervasive. And indeed, the world's economies are now undergoing a digital transformation. The impact of the digital transformation and the evolution of information and communication technologies can be seen through various socioeconomic policy and technology trends. Standardization, of course, plays an important role in digital transformation, ensuring an interoperable and conducive business environment that enables and stimulates innovation and competitiveness. And here the question, what are our activities in support of the EU standardization strategy and how we can contribute to build a stronger Europe? As it is written in the EU standardization strategy, the digital and green transition of EU industries and the well-functioning and resilient single market rely on a standardization system that adequately reflects EU policy priorities. And here with our strategic directions at EC, being at the heart of the digital and being an enabler of standards, we are at the forefront of the standardization of new and existing digital technologies, providing the right environment and tools for an open discussion of ideas and an efficient development of standards for the benefit of all. We are the preferred point of call for ICT-related standardization, providing a platform through which its diverse membership can address the standardization of industry-driven digital technologies, which are positioned for international adoption. We are engaging in supporting European strategic objectives, for example, digitalization, health, and the Green Deal. And we enable comprehensive end-to-end ICT architectures and technologies, including device, network, and cloud, allowing the end user to exploit the digital services where power efficiency and sustainability are at the heart of this development. In addition to embedding the best practices for security and privacy by design, fostering trust and social and ethical responsibility on its work. Through its relationship with the European Commission, the European Free Trade Association, national governments, and other policy makers, and through its relationship with industry leaders and societal stakeholders, EC is the enabler of standards in response to regulatory, legislative, policy, and market needs. With our two strategic directions, being versatile and being inclusive, we are further supporting the integrity, inclusiveness, and accessibility of the European standardization system. EC is versatile in the methods it uses to create EC standard, ICT standards. It will continue to evolve and enhance the governance, as well as it will continue to improve its flexible structure of technical bodies that enable the timely creation of standards by whatever technical methods are appropriate to the task at hand. As mentioned, we continue to improve our governance and our governance rules, where these rules can be changed only by national standardization, national delegations at EC currently. In these national delegations, we have representatives of the member states governance together with the NSOs and the other members from a corresponding country, and they can decide which rules can govern in European Standardization Organization as ETSI. So currently we are preparing changes to our governance rules to see how we can better improve our governance and how we can be prepared for any upcoming changes from the amendment of the standardization regulation. Our membership represents real market and societal needs from local to global, leveraging the digitization of business and industry, circular economy, and the sustainable development of modern society. We are committed to attracting, retaining, and engaging all members in our work, large and small companies, research organizations, as well as other business, consumer, societal, and environmental stakeholders. We promote the participations of SMEs and startups in standard setting as a way to boost the competitiveness of SMEs and startups and access to markets. And at the end, with our strategic direction of being global, ETSI fully supports the EU's ambitions in global standard setting. ETSI creates European standards, technical specifications, and other standardization deliverables intended for global use, with a global and diverse membership and a very wide set of partnerships covering all world regions and relevant sectors of ICT. We also support and actively contribute to the production of global standards through ETSI's collaboration and partnerships with standard setting organizations across the world. ETSI establishes partnerships and tailors its processes in order to be able to offer, contribute to, and influence worldwide standards. And in the meantime, ETSI builds on its European Standardization Organization status to contribute to the European economy, European Union legislation and policies, inclusiveness and competitiveness of European businesses globally, thereby furthering the goal of made in Europe for global use. And Elena, here I can probably give you back the words to go through the EU standardization strategy key points for our 3 ESOs.
Yeah, I think first we'll just ask Gwen to give a quick remark, and then we can continue.
Okay, thank you very much. Perhaps a word, because I see that Sensenelec and ETSI have got their strategy, and I'm glad that they have so. Actually, you prepared yours before the Commission came out, so which might actually impose a few adaptations in the strategies that you produce, but that's how life is. So why did we come out with the strategy? I think we had several objectives, or we identified a few challenges. The first thing is that standardization is, it's very often seen as a technical activity done by boring people in meetings which are lasting for long that nobody gives a damn about. And we wanted to change that image because we're convinced that standardization is absolutely strategic. So that was one of the objectives. I think from the feedback I get, this objectives has been fulfilled, but it's not a given. And it's been fulfilled now, and we'll have to continue working on that to make sure that standardization, is actually remain top of the agenda. Then the practical challenges. I'll name a few as an examples, and then I'll come in the work streams we develop. But to name a few, our priorities. We've got policy priorities. And we absolutely need standardization activities to be better linked with these policy priorities. I was mentioning the transition and resilience. It's quite clear that when you develop a batteries value chain, it's quite clear that when you want to develop a hydrogen value chain, we need standardization work to accompany these efforts. And I'll come back to what we have in mind, but basically it's a better connection between the policymakers and the standardizers from the very beginning. That's the fundamental philosophy. Elena mentioned the link with the 14 ecosystems. That's very much the point. Just a small remark there, because we've got transversal elements which serve the 14 ecosystems, like raw materials or engineering industries, because we need raw materials, so we need machines everywhere. So that's part of the 14 ecosystems logic, but it's just that we take that dimension into consideration. Second practical element, the international dimension. We've been leading on the international standardization efforts for years. We're still a very important partner, but we see more assertiveness from certain partners in international standardization organizations. And from that point of view, I think that it's welcome to a certain extent that colleagues from other countries participate in the system, but at the same time, we have to be more alert to it, more aware, and to make sure that our position as leaders doesn't become a position as followers. And from that point of view, if you want a concrete example of the tough challenge I got, when I was still in charge of raw materials, had this experience with lithium, where basically China proposed to create a working group in ISO on lithium. And despite the fact that we have 27 national standardization bodies participating in ISO, I was informed of this initiative by my Australian colleagues. So that's the type of thing we better improve in the future, that we better coordinate, better function together in order to weigh better. Third element, governance. Neviana touched upon it. I think that's something where basically on standardization activities that are being mandated by the Commission, very often support of European legislation. Everybody is welcome to participate in the work, but we think that EEA members should actually be the ones who take the decisions at every decision-making step. Now, what are we doing with the strategy? I would say we've got various work streams. The first one, of course, is linked with what I was mentioning on priorities. So better anticipation, more prioritization, faster timelines, better connection between policymakers and standardizers from the very beginning. We have standardization agencies. I was mentioning batteries a few years ago, but we've got more. We've got microchips, we've got raw materials, we've got hydrogen. On that, we need to start the work immediately so that we're in time with the standards when it's needed by stakeholders. For that, we plan to create a high-level forum where basically member states and stakeholders will be around the table, and standardizers will be around the table, so that the whole community is around, so that priorities and standardization work are better analyzed and can start in parallel. We're also going to nominate a chief standardization officer, which will be a senior official within the Commission, to better coordinate the work within the Commission and also in the high-level forum. We also, and I think Elena mentioned that as well, we also want to have a look at our harmonized standards already to see whether they're still fit for purpose given our green, digital transition and resilience purposes. So that's the first avenue. The second one, and it's very much related to the task force, is that we want our system to function better, and that's why we had launched the task force before we developed strategy. But we also have this governance issue, which Neviana mentioned, which is basically a question of principle. If I take the example of harmonized standards, giving presumption conformity to European legislation, I don't know any other area in the world where they basically adopted by third countries or meant people not from the constituency where they are. It's a question of just principle in terms of independence of the various elements. And that justifies the legal amendment that actually accompanies the legal amendment proposal that accompanies the strategy. Third work stream, global, international footprint, basically our need to better organize ourselves, to better coordinate ourselves, not to be too late. And then we have, of course, the international forum. We want to liaise better. We want to coordinate it better, including through these elements. Perhaps one element which I'd like to mention as well is that we also want not only to better coordinate within Europeans, but we also want to see whether we could have common objectives or with our like-minded partners. You're aware of Trade and Technology Council with the US, where we are discussing with our American partners, but I could very well imagine that with our Japanese partners, who are traditionally very close to us as far as standardization is concerned, we could have that thing. And one element as well is that we've got a continent which is a very important set of Europe, which is called Africa, and we want also to intensify our contacts with our African partners. The last two work streams is on the first one is on pre-normative work. So it's basically to better link research and standardization activities. We've got concrete ideas there. I just mentioned one. We'd like to develop a code of practice for researchers so that they actually better integrate standardization objectives when looking in their activities. And Elena mentioned the issue of skills and education, which is also very close to my heart, despite, as you mentioned, the fact that the Commission might not be the one having all the competencies for doing that. But I'm quite conscious that we've got an aging male community in standardization, and I would like to be younger and more female. Personally, but that's but men are welcome as well. And then we have to act, and we intend to launch certain initiatives there to work with national standardization bodies as well to that purpose. We've got the idea of the EU University Days for Standardization. So that's the work stream which we will launch. Last word, inclusiveness, and there we are very keen in making sure that inclusiveness works. There are very good practices in member states, and we'd like actually to use these best practices and actually to diffuse them among national standardization bodies to see how we can make things even better, to ensure that SMEs, to ensure the consumers, to ensure that unions, to ensure that NGOs are actually better linked and even more involved than they are today in the process. I'll stop there. That's basically the philosophy of what we're trying to achieve, but the strategy is a policy paper, so now we've got to work on it.
Yes.
Thank you. And now you want to say a few words?
We have a little dilemma because I think that it's 14:37.
Yeah.
So maybe if we can go very quickly to not to this one, but to the next, and connecting this strategy with the task force, because actually, that was the objective also of the workshop today, but we didn't want to miss the opportunity also to have this exchange, which was more comprehensive of the strategy as a whole. Just a little reminder about the task force, where we have got the idea is really to work together on innovative processes that can help us to make the system working well, as Wen has said, so more efficient, more effectively. And we structure our work into work streams. I will start with the work stream 2, because this is going to be actually the next panel, and we thought it was also nice to follow a similar order. At the end of the day, we're standardizers. So work stream 2 is connected to operational improvements. And I must say that we have had 4 meetings since our last meeting before the first workshop. And while in our first part of the task force, of course, it took us some time to arrange on the way of working. We dedicated also some time to the work stream 1. These 4 last meetings have been mainly dedicated to the work stream 2. That, as we all can imagine, was not that easy, because we had a history, because somehow we came from different backgrounds, and what we really wanted to do is to build a common understanding and the trust, and to work together in a process that can engage all the community. So I will not elaborate on the sense and the lake part, but I think that we can share these slides later. There have been a lot of activities that have been made by Sense and Elect NHC in order to support the operational efficiency, also to spread the practical information that we have been learning in the whole process of citation, the requirements, the role of the Commission, the assessment from the HAS consultants, though we are not there yet. So we have worked very hard on the standardization request, and this is something that is going to be presented later today. But we are engaged as ESOs to transfer this information, to put in practice all the lessons that we are learning in this process. And I must say that we see also a very positive contribution from the European Commission, where we had got representatives in the task force from several DGs under the leadership of DG Grow, because for us also it's important due to the horizontality. I mean, in the case of Sense and Elect, we cover so many sectors, and we really like to follow an approach that can be as comprehensive as possible, because that helps also to simplify the process. So this is the contribution that we are making. It's not only about meeting the task force, it's also to put in practice what we are learning in this, and assessing that and engaging into pilot projects that we intend to implement as soon as possible. So if you allow, Neviana, maybe we can move to the next, just to gain a little time and allow time for questions. I don't know if we will be able to address any questions now, Giovanni. Or
no, we will keep the questions to after
later.
The next session. Yeah.
Okay. So then I think that I will connect the work stream 1, which so I mentioned the work stream 2, that is operational improvements, and the work stream 1, that is super interesting, strategic alignment. When has mentioned the importance of getting together. I mean, it's like the marriage of the bottom-up and the top-down approach for the how to better use the standardization in Europe in the achievements and the implementation of policy objectives, policy and regulatory objectives. And the presentation that you have now on the screen may be familiar. You may remember that Christoph Winterhalter, who is one of the representatives of the sentinel community in the task force, introduced that together with Neviana, also in our first task force. The idea really is to get together early enough in the process so that we can have exchanges about feasibility, about impact in the market, about policy objectives, about where we want to go and how we can get there, using also the experience of the standardization community. And then we believe that we can have a much faster and more efficient process and achieve policy objectives, but also address market needs and market requirements. So I leave it there and give the floor to our moderator.
Thank you very much, Elena. And as it has been so well and so nicely introduced, now we can move on to the next session, which will be about work stream 1, strategic alignment. And especially we will hear about a very interesting pilot on hydrogen and understand its first steps. For that, we're going to hear from Mr. Henning Herrenstein, Deputy Head of Unit at the Energy Intensive Industry, the Raw Material Directorate at DG Grow, the European Commission, and Bernard Gendreau, Chair of the Sen and Senelec JTC6 Hydrogen in Energy Systems. Mr. Herrenstein, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having invited me to this workshop here today. I am working in the Commission in the DG Grow department, heading the hydrogen team here. Why hydrogen? What's the relevance of hydrogen? If we want to meet our Fit for 55 objectives and facilitate and enable the green transition of our industry, especially the highly emitting energy intensive industries, but also many transport sectors, then this will only work with hydrogen. Basically, because from a technological point of view, while the direct electrification of industry and transport, think battery cars, is the priority, there is physical limits to the electrification where you need very high amounts of energy. Think steel making, for example, think refining processes. We are not able to decarbonize these processes without the use of hydrogen. And a lot of research has gone into hydrogen, often publicly funded, over the last 20, 25 and more years, so that we are now fortunately at a milestone where many of the hydrogen technologies and applications have reached a research level that is mature enough for us to market scale and commercialize these technologies. And that's why, for example, you no longer only have a hydrogen team in the Commission's DG Research department, but now also in our DG, which is responsible for industry. Very acutely important, of course, is also the possibility for hydrogen to replace natural gas, important in the context of the security situation in the eastern part of Europe. So what is needed to roll out hydrogen? Apart from very large financial investments that we facilitate through state aid mechanisms, the EU Recovery Resilience Facility, but also a lot of EU funds, we need to, of course, establish a business case for the companies to make the necessary transition and investments. And that business case requires, among others, a clear regulatory framework within which businesses can operate. So we are in the process of defining the EU regulation on hydrogen, which has a legislative aspect and has a standardization aspect. And I'll come to that, of course, giving you interest in that in a minute. We also need to facilitate more integrated value chains and a more integrated European hydrogen industry, for which we have the European Clean Hydrogen Alliance, which is an industrial alliance, meaning it brings together the stakeholder community in Europe that works on hydrogen. There's over 1,500 members of the alliance. And this alliance did a report saying what are the main barriers that we companies and other stakeholders see to the market scale deployment of hydrogen. And the absence of standards was very high up on the list of these barriers, which is why we then started to look into it further with our colleagues at Sensenelec, and it's very nice to see colleagues, including Bernard, here with me today. So we are setting up within the structures of this alliance, where all the stakeholders come together, a working group on standards to dig a little deeper and look from the industry side, what are the standards gaps, what are the needs, what should be the priority. Building on the important work that the Senelec's FEM working group and others have done already, we want to feed into the, of course, long-standing and ongoing work by Senelec and other stakeholders to identify standardization needs and prioritize standards and start the preparation of these standards in the different technical committees. So we want to bring in the stakeholder and industry side that, of course, is represented at Senelec, but often at the technical level of the standards experts. And we are bringing in more the business perspective from these stakeholders that say, look, this is what we need. This is what we need first. This is what we need second. If we want to deploy hydrogen technologies on a larger scale, as is our declared common objective. So it's a way of bringing together, if you want, the stakeholders that we have in the alliance the policy dimension that we see from the Commission and the experts in Sensenelec that have for years, of course, already worked on hydrogen standards, often on pre-normative research, and a lot of important and good work has been done there already. Yet it is our feeling that with the stage of development where we are moving from hydrogen as a research issue to an industrial market scale deployment issue, these processes need to be sped up. They need to be made more strategic with the input also of these stakeholders. So that is the idea, how we together with the community want to work in this priority area for us again, because it enables us to manage the green transition. It enables us to gain a better energy security and independence, and against an industrial competitiveness background, given that European companies have a technological leadership acquired in many important hydrogen technologies. Thank you very much for listening. Happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Henning. I think now we're going to hear from Bernard Gendreau, which, if I'm not mistaken, has sent some slides, right? Correct. So, okay, thanks. So we're going to put
this is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much, Giovanni, and thank you also, Henning, for setting the scene. I think it's very interesting. I would like now to just illustrate this strategic approach Henning also show us, just to pave the way to the further development in the field of the hydrogen sector. But first of all, I would like to remind you a few points about how the story started. The Sensenelec Sector Forum Energy Management, Energy Transition is conducting and permanently updating technology watch in the energy sector and organize annual workshop in a way to identify if one of the emerging or promising topics identified would be relevant for further consideration. And thus, 8 years ago, hydrogen was one of those topics. When we communicated to Sensenelec about this initiative, Sensenelec, the Joint Research Center, European Commission, proposed to organize a wider event in the framework of the joint initiative on putting science into standards. And this has been the beginning of the progressively, yes, intensification of the hydrogen-related activities up to becoming one of the top priority in the European Union. The few slides I would like to show you sum up the major ingredients and steps we followed towards a successful development of the hydrogen activities, and fully relevant with and in support of the European Union decarbonization strategies. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. First, there is really a need to share a common vision, to understand what is the EU context, to understand what are the main objective commitments. This is something extremely key. And within this, the different activities at Sensenelec and the Sector from Energy Management, Energy Transition, we have a role to align understanding and awareness among all our different actors, and not only industrial actors, but also academic, research institutes, consumer representative, etc. And standardization, definitely in this context, has to be approached with its key role as booster from innovation to market, but also a key contributor to meeting our targets, European targets, thanks to the harmonization throughout Europe of the reference standards in 34 countries, in fact, that will access to a very large market of consumers. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you, Alberto. First of all, in this context, what is very important is to anticipate. Anticipation, collective engagement, giving the floor to any type of stakeholders, categories of interested parties to express their needs, to express also some gaps and barriers they are facing. And as I said before, 8 years ago, we had this idea of this workshop about hydrogen. As a conclusion of the workshop, there was an expression of needs for having an open platform to continue to debate, discuss, to share ideas, to brainstorm. And based on that, we published in 2015, then an updated report in 2019. We published a report about gap analysis and recommendations. And these recommendations are still valid today and serve as kind of strawman document for setting our different activities and action plan. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you very much. When we want to enter in such an approach and to anticipate and to be sure we are developing standards, not just for developing standards, but for helping and supporting the different users and stakeholders with regard to their expression of needs. It is back to what Elena said before, considering the bottom-up approach that should fit with the top-down strategic level. The first thing is really to set the right cooperation, collaboration level at a very early stage. That's what we did when we created the working group Hydrogen within the Sector from Energy Management, Energy Transition, as well as a dedicated joint SEN and SENELEC technical committees for just hydrogen in energy system. You have here a list of the main different categories of stakeholders we engage with, in addition to our traditional academic research institute representative, consumers representative, and of course, all the industrial sector. And this is very important because we need to anticipate to find the right partners if we want to boost the maturity of the different elements of the value chain. Next slide, please. So in such a context, we run all together with all these different partners. We decided to run a mapping exercise to collect the expression of needs, the perception of gaps or barriers from all the different actors from the market. And based on that, we made a few recommendations, first about improvement of the legislation and regulatory framework, but also to further support research, development, and innovation towards raising maturity of the technologies and the different element of the value chains. And we also fed, in fact, the different European funded programs and the call for proposal with some essential elements to be considered. We also supported and contributed to making recommendation for pre-normative research, as was discussed in the introduction already. That is extremely important to accelerate the development of the standards in the further stage. And of course, standardization development. That was extremely important to run this exercise all together in order to be able to set the right, let's say, list of priorities as expressed also before by Henning. Next slide, please. Just to give you an example, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but we agreed between all these different categories of partners, stakeholders, and in a collaborative manner, we identified a few task group or sub-topics that need to have some specific consideration. First of all, regarding the relation the hydrogen sector will have with and to the electricity grid, especially with regard to power to hydrogen. Then some specific sector or subsector regarding blending the natural gas sector, and also from technical issues, quality issues, but also application side. Same regarding pure hydrogen applications and context. And we had some transfer or cross-cutting activities like sharing the same terms and definition, which is always very, very useful and essential to start some work speaking the same language, and also safety, security, and a few others. So next slide, please. So just to give you a kind of final vision about what we are doing, it was decided a few years ago that this working group hydrogen needs to be permanently active. We need to have this type of open platform. We need to have a flexible and agile open platform in order to be able to continue to collect either feedback from the existing standards or existing developments, but also to continue to identify what will be critical for moving as quickly as possible to meeting our European ambitions in that sense. And recently, again, in collaboration with the European Commission, the Joint Research Center, Hydrogen Europe, Clean Hydrogen Alliance, and the major consumer associations, and of course, all our industrial partners, we organized 3 workshops just in support of what is one of the key milestones in the Fit for 55 roadmap. So 3 workshops, one for the maritime sector, one from the heavy duty vehicles, and one for the liquid hydrogen, just to fine tune and all together agreed about what needs to be prioritized in terms of topics to consider, either on the legislative side or in the research and development and innovation sector, or of course, pre-normative research and standardization development. That's something that is ongoing. We'll have a few other and additional workshops in mind. We will come back, of course, to you with this later. So next time, and this is my concluding slide, sorry. Please, yes, no, just one before. Ahead, just to, yes, so that one is fine. Just to remind that the key to successful development is the collaboration and cooperation between all stakeholders, not forgetting also academic, research institute, and consumers, citizens, the representative. They are the ones who will benefit from all these development, and this is a key part of what we offer through this type of open platform. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to explain to you how we moved ahead with this working group in the field of hydrogen.
Thank you, Bernard, and thank you, Henning, for your very interesting presentation. Don't leave now, please, because now is the moment to have around 20 minutes of reactions and open discussion on what has been said so far. I see that we've already received some questions in the Q&A, so I thank all of those who have broken the glass, as we say in Italian, and I've actually asked questions. I see. So I propose we start with the first one, which I think is for the presenters of the first panel. So Gwen and Elena, and I'll try to read. Okay. Matthias Krempel asks, being a convener of a CNTC, I realize in my work outside standardization the limited presence of SEN and SENELEC standards. For example, in the academic and non-commercial organization world, especially due to their financing system that is based, like with ISO, on selling the standard text at high prices. For this reason, there is seemingly a much higher acceptance with freely available standards like an IST. This is even true for standards that document acceptable means of compliance to EU acts of the legislation. Do you intend to change that during the implementation of the new strategy? Who wants to
I can start.
Okay, thanks.
Well, first, Matthias, thank you very much for the question, because I think that it is very important that we understand the importance of the sustainability of the business models. And I think that it's also important that to compare pears with pears and apples with apples. NIST is a public funded organization. So, and actually, I'm not so sure that these standards that are produced by NIST are following the process that we're calling here with all the interested parties. I'm not saying that they produce bad standards, don't get me wrong, but it's a complete different approach. So I also would like to go back to the myth that standards have got very high prices, because I think that you need, I mean, give us an example. I have seen standards for 25 euros. And if you are a business operator, or even if you're an academy, you invest money in knowledge. And I don't want either to say that efforts can be made, but we need to have a sustainable business model. And for the time being, the business model that is followed and that sustain the SEN, SENELEC, and ISO-IC system is based on the sales of the standards. And someone has to pay for that. because if there is not a financing of the process, it will not be possible to develop the standards, it will not be possible to improve continuously the system, it will not be possible to apply many of the required processes and procedures and the investments that are required to develop in the standards delivery and to be able to engage all the different parties. So for the time being, I must say no, we are not, and I'm talking on the sensitive side, we are looking into possibilities to engage on renewed business models that can ensure the sustainability of the system. But for the time being, this is the way to finance a system. And just, I know that it's not very nice to give a question as a reply, but can you imagine the cost of the standards if they were not developed by the standardization organizations that exist today? I just leave it there.
Do you want to add something, Gwen?
I'll be relatively short on that one. This is, of course, we've got interest in everybody having access to standard. What Elena is saying on her business model, I won't comment. She knows it better than I do. At the same time, it's true that standards very often have got a reasonable price. One element not to forget. Basically, very often standards, some standards are voluntary standards giving presumption conformity, so they don't exclude another route to obey, to actually demonstrate conformity to the legislation. So there's a way out. This being said, there are initiatives being taken by certain member states at national level, and when I said that we're going to look at best practices and possibilities to improve the system, we're open to have this examination and see what could be feasible. But I would say that's within the framework in which we operate.
Okay. Thank you very much. If it's okay, I'm going to move to the second question by Pamela Tarif. Thanks to the panel for the discussion. You're welcome. I heard Gwen Kozigu mention the importance of NGO participation in standards development. ECOS agrees, and building on this point, what can the ESOs say about expectations for inclusiveness of civil society when talking about influencing work taking place at the international level, given the current lack of automatic rights to take part? I think now maybe it's Elena, but also we can hear from Mediana if she wants to say the words, since she's referring to the ESOs.
Yeah. Well, Pamela, I think this is a recurrent question, and in a way, this is something that should be asked to the international standards organizations. But I would like to also go back to the basics. So the CEN-CENELEC, ISO, and IEC, we are national members based organizations. So our members actually, and I think this, again, it's a very important asset of our system. They are close to the different stakeholders. They can speak to their stakeholders in their own language, and they can engage easily with the societal, or what sometimes we call the weakest stakeholders that maybe don't have the means to invest or to participate in the standards making process. I know that many of our members, or our national members, have in place a lot of actions and measures in order to engage with the civil society, as you have mentioned. It doesn't mean that there is no more room for improvements, and this is also the case for the international bodies that are national members organizations in the case of ISO and IEC. And I understand that they look into the relevant and appropriate participation of all interested parties in the standards making process. And now I will give a personal opinion, something that I say all the time. the wider the participation, the wider the market acceptance. So it is on our own interest as standards development organizations to make sure that all the parties that are willing to participate and that we encourage all the parties to contribute to the standards making process, because that will mean that our standards will be better understood by the market and more used, and that can only be good.
Neviana, do you want to add some words to that?
Yes.
Okay,
thank you very much. I wanted to add to that at ETSI we have our famous 3SI program, where we are interacting regularly with societal stakeholders, with the Annex 3 organizations in particular, and we are working together to be able to understand their needs and to appropriately find any tools and means how we can include them better in the standard setting at ETSI. We have a regular roundtable with the Annex 3 organizations, and now in the changes in our governance rules, which I have mentioned previously, we are also foreseeing how we can better take their comments well in advance on draft standards before going and during the EN approval process. And also we are thinking about how we can better inform the Annex 3 organizations and other societal stakeholders about upcoming standardization requests, which we expect to come to the ESOs well in advance, to be able to take their input on time during the execution of the standardization requests. So there is a lot to be done here, we admit, but during the last several years, we had many activities, and now we have further initiatives on creation of specific groups, which can better see what can be improved on the inclusiveness side, on the diversity side, gender neutrality, using gender neutral language also during the standard setting. And at the end, we all have the common goal to have the input of all societal stakeholders in order to make the standards better and really for global and use for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Neviana. Can we go back to the first question there? Neviana, the next question is for you as well. So don't go away. Chiara Giovannini says, I read with interest that the ETSI proposed changes linked to the Task Force Workstream 2 about giving Annex 3 the right to submit their vote or comments directly and not as part of the Belgian delegation. This is exactly what we proposed to the ECGA 2 years ago, and it was rejected. Does it mean that now ETSI changed its mind? And when and how will this happen?
Yes, as I mentioned, during the last several years, we tried different approaches, how to understand better the Annex 3 organization's needs. And now, as part of our work on better supporting the EU standardization strategy, we are trying to see what kind of different approaches we can use in order to improve this inclusiveness and take really in advance the comments from the Annex 3 organizations, probably directly and not during the public inquiry when they have to submit their comments to the national standardization organizations, because we have heard several times from the Annex 3 organizations that they have difficulties with the process. So the overall goal is how to improve the process to be able really to take all the input from all societal stakeholders during the EN approval process to be able to change the standards appropriately for the benefit of all.
Thank you, Naviana. I think we have still some time for another question at least. And the next one is for Gwen. Thomas Timke asks, I appreciate your goals of better and earlier involvement and the increased appreciation of experts. Is there any way to consider this not only for future, but also for processes in progress? And then he used the example of the EU batteries regulation, saying that many experts feel quite the opposite of these promising announcements. They started already during eco-design for batteries and didn't change for battery topics.
I mean, when I was mentioning batteries, actually, I mentioned it as something that was a wake-up call in the sense that we didn't actually did that fast enough, and that's actually the reason why we're doing it differently with hydrogen, for example. So we're quite conscious of the fact that things could have worked better as far as batteries is concerned. So that's decidedly the fact that we want to improve things in terms of anticipation. Which means also that the work afterwards in the process will go more smoothly. Now, I can't comment on the exact process as far as batteries today are concerned, because basically I don't know in practice whether there are difficulties or not. But if there are, please contact the people in charge within the Commission, either my team as personalization concerned, people in charge of the batteries field, and we'll look at it and see how we can improve the process.
Can I have the floor?
Yeah, of course, Elena, please.
No, it's not a question. Before we close the questions, I wanted to thank also Henning and Bernard. They didn't get any questions, but I now will have my hat of co-chair of the task force because I think it was very good what you presented today. We had a lot of discussions about which pilot to choose to make a reality of this strategic alignment. I think Thomas has mentioned the case of batteries. This is something that we are trying to avoid with hydrogen, with this innovative process and the early connection. And I thought it was extremely useful that you bring here the first steps. I know that we are not yet there, but I think it's very good that this connection between policymakers and the standards community has started. And I think that we all have in the task force a lot of expectations for this very important pilot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Elena. Then I propose we move forward to the next session. And then we can get back to your questions from the public after the second session. So continue asking questions, and there is still some time for that afterwards. But now the second session is about workstream 2. We already did workstream 1, now it's workstream 2 on the improvements on operational matters. And for that, we're gonna hear some presentations from Frédéric Vaillant, Sanelec Vice President Technical, Neviana Nikolowski, the chair of the SCGA, and Gwen Kozigu, Director of DG Grow Directorate H at the European Commission. So please, Frédéric, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I am very happy to present you the results of how today work on the workstream 2. As you know, we decided in the task force to tackle the workstream 1 and workstream 2 in all our meetings. So obviously strategy is of the highest importance, but strategy is also nothing without being implemented. And so this workstream 2, it's about helping strategy becoming really a reality. And it's something that we are looking very carefully all together. A very significant work has been done by all people, significant work in the EC, as Elena and Gwen mentioned. There are several people from several directions of European Commission that are participating in the workstream 2. And also regarding the ESOs, we involve a lot of different working groups, and Elena mentioned some of them in her presentation. What's sure, it's after the first meetings were really about better understanding each of us, better understanding the needs of each of us, better understanding the constraints of each of us. And now we can say that, especially during the 3 last meetings among the 8 we had, we made really significant step in order to get improvement in the process, knowing that we also said that a global agreement will be done only at the end of the process. So we cannot consider that what will be presented today will be for sure the end of the story. So our objective of working through, we have 3 of them. The first one is about having a good process for standardization request drafting. We know that in the recent past, we did have some standardization requests which were really efficient, going straight away to an approval, even if we had some issues to be solved before sending the standardization request to inter-service consultation in EC or Committee of Standards. And we did see also, unfortunately, some bad examples with standardization requests which were rejected, even and then coming back and then accepted. And it was a pity not having this standardization request being able to be accepted the first time. So we really wanted to solve this and have a smooth process. The second point is obviously how can we collectively deliver good standards and easy to use, easy to facilitate the compliance with legislation or to support the EU policies. So it's really about the implementation of standards. And the last one is about the timely citation of standards by the EC. As you know, for harmonized standards, which are aiming to give presumption of conformity, the standards have to be cited in the official journal, and it's sometimes quite difficult to have this. So the first objective was the one it mentions there. We really worked a lot on it, and it's now close for being decided. And the 2 others are things we are currently working on. So next slide, please. Obviously, we don't consider only our internal process or our internal rules. So workstream 1, alignment of European policies, business priorities, and standardization and strategic sectors, as Hydrogen was just highlighting before, is something very important. It makes the things easier from the beginning. And the point is that ESOs and ECs and EFTA are so well prepared before the standardization request. We had also a lot of things coming from the legal issues, and we also it was important for us to understand and to as I told already, better understand each other's, and having this mutual understanding which make us able to propose some acceleration measures. I would like also to add to these slides the input we could have from the different groups coming from SEN, SENELEC, ETSI, and other groups, and especially also the brainstorming groups that was put in place thanks to an EC initiative. This brainstorming group between the European Commission, EFTA, IEC, ISO, and SEN and SENELEC. These were also good inputs for our work. Next slide, please. So at the beginning, the first work we did, and it took us at least 3 or 4 meetings to do that, it was really to identify and to share the issues that we have in the whole life cycle of the harmonized standards. And so this work was done by the ESOs and the European Commission, but they were really helped by a lot of inputs coming from different stakeholders, from associations, from Annex 3 associations. And so it's really something which we shared a common list of issues with detailed examples, and it's really helpful now to tackle and to look at the difficulties we have to tackle. So we classified in 5 different steps. So the preliminary stage, the standardization request drafting, the execution, so the development of standards, the way it's approved, including the HIS assessment, then the citation process, and least the maintenance stage. And you have all of this, which is in the next slide. So don't be afraid about the complexity of these slides. So here you can see all the different steps that we are considering all together, with some steps where obviously the Open Commission is completely leading and deciding. So it's the blue dark, and then you have some way of exchanges between the ECs, the ESOs, and the stakeholders, which are in green, and where we think we can really make the EC at least aware about what's happening, and so that we can help to make the standardization request easy to be accepted, if I can say this one. And then you have afterwards, so currently we dealt with the first bullet, so the first preliminary discussions, and then the drafting, and I will let the floor to Gwen, I think, to introduce the next ones.
No, it's Neviana.
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you, Frederic. So as you said, we had sometimes difficult but constructive discussion in the task force in the beginning when we started, because we needed to structure our work and to see how we can overcome the issues. So we have seen that first we need better communication between the parties, and indeed communication is key to have a good mutual understanding on the common work, to see what are the issues, to see them early on and also during the process. We needed to look at capacity building, to identify possible early acceleration measures, to see how we can mitigate problems, how we can solve the problems, and what kind of mechanisms for problem solving we can establish between the ESOs and the European Commission to be able to overcome the problems as they appear in the process. We decided to look also in the HAS consultants system and how we can improve the system for both sides. As well, we decided to look in the interoperability to bring the respective IT systems better in line. And there, the overall agreements which we have reached to now, first, I would like to note that in the task force, and at the end, when this task force is reaching its mandate, we will approve the full package of all the measures and recommendations which we will identify. Currently, we have reached overall agreements on the preliminary stage and on the standardization request drafting. We still are looking at the standardization request execution, citation, and maintenance. And here I can give the word to Gwen to lead us in details to the agreements which we have reached till now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we have made excellent progress on the first two elements that Neviana was mentioning, actually the preliminary stage and the standardization request. So basically on the preliminary stage, I mean, if you look at what can actually generate the need for action, you can have new policy priorities, you can have criticalities that have been identified for specific products, or you can also have the EU legislation which is planned to be revised with the need for new standards to be produced. So those are the elements. But there, what we agreed upon is that the expert groups where we can have all stakeholders together is actually playing an essential role, because that's what ensures, first, the openness, second, the inclusiveness, third, the transparency of the process. And it's very important that there we've got a good exchange so that the issues are very well identified, understood by everybody before the work actually starts. So that's a key element, so that everybody is basically on the same page, which might not have been the case on a systematic basis in the past, and that we definitely want to improve. And I confirm what Elena and Diana have been saying earlier on, is that we are not sleeping. The work has not always been easy, but we're working hard, and there's a desire on all sides actually to make progress. I think we're demonstrating it, even if we are not finished yet by far, but we're making good progress. Now, of course, for these expert groups to function and to play the important role I was just mentioning, we have to make sure that they are functioning well, and that's of course setting them up and ensuring the smooth functioning of those groups is a Commission responsibility. ESOs will also have to make sure that they're basically systematically involved in the work of these groups. Next slide, please. Now, on the standardization request drafting, that's actually the element where we made the most progress for the time being. It's clear that we were mentioning the various elements we've been discussing upon among ourselves on the various stages along the process, be it better communication between all parties, being the legal issues and legal constraints and matters, the procedures, funding, etc. So there, it's clear that the drafting of standardization request is a Commission responsibility, but we want to consult stakeholders intensively. And that's why the expert group is essential, so that we actually prepare standardization requests, having heard everybody as well. The template that we introduced as far as Commission is concerned back 4 years ago now will be applied, and that's something that we confirmed. Of course, that's always easier said than done, but we will put the necessary resources so that they can be amended and updated. The standardization request can be updated and amended when necessary. You know, that happens quite often actually, and we need to be reactive so that things function properly. And another element which we agreed upon is that we recommend an expiry date of at least 12 months of the existing standards after the last deadline for the delivery of the requested standards. So this sort of coexistence period that we foresee. Just to give you a hint of the discussion, there's also that tension first time we need to adapt and we need actually to use these existing standards before they're replaced. And the other thing, which is sort of competition issue, where we don't want to have coexistence of standards for too long a period as well, because they might not involve the same costs for the products. And so that's basically the type of tension that we have to discuss very practically. The list of the requested standards, we agreed that we would draft them in agreement between the Commission and ESOs after consultation with Annex 3 organizations and all other relevant stakeholders. And the deadlines, of course, for delivery of standards have to be decided. But of course, we will consult all relevant stakeholders before defining them, and we'll look very carefully at comments that European Standardization Organization might issue as far as the actual feasibility is concerned. There again, it's always, and that's another explanation of why sometimes discussions were difficult, because there is a practical element. At the same time, there might be policy needs, and there we have to always find the sort of compromise that it looks easy on the slide, but it involves quite a lot of discussion. Next slide, please, Alberto. Now, for legal requirements, it's quite clear that we have to make a distinction between standards that are strictly linked to the underlying legislation, those that actually give presumption of conformity to essential requirements under the new legislative framework, and that has to be a Commission decision. That's not really changed. The requirements within other pieces of legislation, and that's the same thing. But there might be legal requirements or legal elements or other elements go beyond the main generating legislation that is provoking standardization requests, not corresponding to essential requirements or not from the other horizontal legislation. Or basically there we would have to decide as far as Commission is concerned to insert them or not, but for that we will consult the European Standardization organizations first and other stakeholders, and we will explain if we decide to insert them, why we explain them, the rationale of why it's needed in our view to have those requirements inserted. I think it's fair, it's a question of transparency, and it's not that the Commission tends to be capricious, but just to give you the guarantee that we're not having a caprice. And we'll be ready to give those explanations in writing when asked for that, in order to serve as a reference document for the HAS consultants, standardization experts. It might not always be necessary, but if requested, we will do that. The ESOs, of course, we'll have to verify the critical elements that are necessary to ensure that the standardization requests can be fulfilled, and if they've got questions for clarifications or improvements, then they will come back to us, and then we will have an exchange. Then we also want to have a clear involvement of the chair of the Committee of Standards and the Secretariat as when there are persistent issue in drafting the standardization request, so that we move the things forward, so that we don't get blocked. We had also the discussion about funding, despite the fact that we always fund, I think, but I mean, there was that sort of concern. So basically, when the standardization request concerns the Commission priorities, then the standardization organizations will submit to the Commission a final proposal for action grants just after the Committee of Standards approval, so that we can examine it, look at it, and process it in time. Berto? Now, I leave it there. This progress, so there's basically progress on the preliminary stage and the standardization request that we made. We have to work on further steps before, because what I just presented is only part of the package, and we will have the solution only once we've got all the elements, because there's no point in agreeing on those points if we do not do the next stage. But we are determined to work on the next stages. It took a bit of a while to get the process started, but I think since then we're doing an excellent work. So I don't know who is having the floor about those.
Yes, I will be happy to continue.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much, Gwen. Indeed, for us, it was really extremely important to reach all these agreements on the drafting of standardization requests, especially on having the clear requirements, scope, timelines, and to have them agreed between the Commission and the ESOs. And what we currently discussed, as you said, at the end we will approve the full package, not only one or another block of the process, but the full package from the preliminary start before drafting of the standardization request up to execution, citation of standards. Next slide, please. Here we are currently discussing the execution process of standardization requests execution. And there, you know, the European standardization organizations have the ownership and are executing the process of standard setting. Currently, we are discussing the need to ensure that relevant technical committees and their experts will be fully aware of the legal and policy backgrounds for the standardization requests, about the ongoing discussions in the expert group, and if there are issues which are of concern, we can have an early resolution of these issues to define and improve the internal quality check as well, like checklists, which we will have for internal quality control before submitting standards for assessment and citation. And also it's important to note that we are discussing how the Commission can support the ESOs, for example, to organize a presentation to relevant technical committees and their experts on legal technical expectations in the standardization requests, and also assess matters which have not been already clarified or are still unclear for the experts when the standardization request is received. Next slide, please. And here, when we go through the assessment, as it was already announced in the call for the new HAS system contract, there is an increase of budget from 2,200 person days per year for HAS consultant services to 3,400, and this allocated among the sectors, which is 55% more. We will put some efforts still on discussing better vertical horizontal coherence of the assessment of standards, more communication and meeting participation, as well as introduction of feedback mechanism when we have negative assessments. So how we can improve the process in order to have less and less negative assessments when we provide standards to the Commission. And as well, there will be introduction of a new task for the contractor, communication and information to the technical bodies of the European standardization organizations and to the Commission services in order to train and explain the beneficiaries of the system on its functioning. And as well, a new element, introduction of conditional compliance assessment result option. The overall goal with these discussions is again to improve the vertical horizontal coherence of the assessment and to be able to avoid or have less and less cases when we have negative assessments of standards before citation. And here probably Frederick can say what is next.
Yes, thank you, Nediana. So next slide, please, Alberto. Yes, so as Gwen explained what is currently done, Nediana explained what we are currently doing, and so what is on our plate for the close future. It's really to look at other aspects of standard development process and HS assessment, even if obviously the new contracts that, as John Peace mentioned, should really make us collectively more efficient. We are also looking at possible ESO fast-track procedures to address shortcomings that should block or delay the citation, which are identified at the later stages. And especially we are thinking, for example, on datations or some references. How can we manage to adapt them if the synchronization between different standards is not sufficient enough, and so that we avoid to block a citation of standards because of things like this. Obviously, we have to look collectively on the citation process, even if this citation process is mainly in hands of the Commission. And at the end, we hope that we will have tackled all the main blocking points of our process, but we will have now to review, to monitor the global process, to review regularly how it works, have a periodical review of the cited standards, amending the standardization request. As we do see, it's really key if that this standardization request can be quickly or sufficiently quickly enough being revised in terms of list of standards, in terms of dates, etc. It's really important that this standardization can be amended if we want to play completely together the game. And last but not least in this list is a better alignment and improvement of our IT tools, either the EC1 and the ESOs and ETSI1 or Sensenelec and ETSI1s, so that we will really be able to make an efficient use of the resources that we put all together in the standardization process and in the support of the legislation, and so that we can better serve and better develop the internal market for the best of all the stakeholders. So that's really the spirit we are all in, having a win-win situation, which will unblock this difficult situation we face for now several years. And we all hope that we will succeed in making this a bad souvenir, and so that we can really serve as the best the European industry and the European Union. So I think we are done for this presentation of work streams 2. So I give back the floor to our moderator for the question.
Thank you very much. Thanks to our 3 panelists who, together with being very clear and thorough, they've also been perfectly on time. So we're going to have 4 more minutes than previously planned to reply to the questions, which I see are raining in. So good job, everybody. We will start with one by Martin Chapman, which is, will the Standards Market Relevance Roundtable, SMART, which was, be preserved so as to ensure stakeholder engagement in the initial stages of standards request? And I would like to ask that to Gwen.
I mean, stakeholders' engagement in initial stages will be guaranteed. That's for sure. So you can go from that assumption. I mean, whatever the instrument is, I never comment on instruments that far, but I mean, stakeholders' engagement that will actually be maintained, including in the initial stages.
Okay. And maybe we can link it up with the second question still by Martin Chapman, saying, similarly, will the MSP, which stands for Multi-Stakeholder Platform for ICT Standardization, remain? And should it play more of a role in relevant standards requests?
The MSP has been playing a very useful role. We've got the Standardization Strategy announced the creation of a high-level forum. So the connection between the MSP and the high-level forum will have to have a look at. Not everything has been decided yet, as I mentioned, but basically our overwhelming body will be the high-level forum, and then we'll see how we can actually ride on the very useful work of the MSP as far as ICT standardization is concerned on that basis.
Okay. Thanks. Let's see for another one, still to the European Commission. So that will still be
I don't want it to be a one-man show.
You are requested. We see a new trend of standardization requests for European standards before the legislation is approved, with a view of issuing a second request for harmonized standards once the legislation is approved. We wonder, and actually wondering is Chiara Giovannini, so we wonder whether this is a good idea, bearing in mind that it can potentially preempt the legislative process, and it can also increase the complexity of the coordination with the ESOs, which might work on European standards, which will never become harmonized.
I'm aware of the challenge, but one has to be honest. We can't be at the same time, we need to anticipate, and then the other, say we wait until the co-legislators have settled everything. So, I mean, that's the tension to which we are confronted. I think we have to be a bit reasonable there. It's not because the legislation has not been fully adopted. Usually the debate crystallizes relatively rapidly on a few issues, and then the work can already be undertaken on other issues, or even on these issues, but while leaving certain of the elements a bit pending see what the co-legislators have decided. I don't think it's a black and white situation. So that should be looked at on a case-by-case basis, but it's not because the legislation has not been fully approved by co-legislators, basically 2 years after the Commission proposal. It's something urgent to be sorted out.
Thanks. I see you now, Elena. Do you want to add something, or?
Well, actually, I think that it is really important that we, as Wen was saying, we anticipate and we are agile in the process. So the sooner we start discussing, the faster we will deliver. But we need to adjust to legal requirements also. Yes.
Okay, we have a question again by Pamela Tarif.
I can take that just to make
Okay.
when
So
a break, because I know it's more a question for the Commission, but actually, Pamela, in the expert groups, all the Annex 3 the societal stakeholders are invited. So this is not new. It's something that is already happening. And in the discussions about the process, because it is true that sometimes it's not the expert group, as Wen was saying, the idea is really that there will be always this expert group where there will be all relevant stakeholders participating in and supporting the Commission and giving the input in the standardization request.
Okay, then we have, thank you, Elena. Next question actually is going to put together two questions we received from Het Maes and Glenn Bosmans. And basically, Het asks, do I read correctly that it takes 8-12 months to develop a standardization request? What will be then the time allowed to develop standards, especially brand new ones? And Glenn asks to this, is the process for requesting and drafting a standard being increased? So who wants to take this?
I can answer that.
Elena, okay.
Yes, well, we are not in a straight jackets. The sooner, the better. I think that is the answer to this. This is an average. This is the average time that so far the development of a standardization request has taken. We are working a lot in the standardization organizations on flexible development time, so that time to market is very important, so that also the experts that are involved in the standard development and that they know when the standard is needed can give us a hint about the time that they consider would be relevant for the development of the standard. But as I said, the sooner the better, provided that we respect all the relevant requirements and rules in the process. And I think this is what the digital transformation also does for us, because we can indeed improve the time to market if we manage to put in place tools and solutions that help us to do the collaboration, the online collaboration, and at the same time to follow the procedures that we need to follow.
Frederic speaking. I can perhaps add a word to Elena's one. So it's obvious that standards has to be quick on the market, because we do have to serve the market and to serve the market evolution, etc. So it's really important that we are there on time, and especially in the digital time. And we can also highlight the fact that we will discuss a bit earlier than before, if I understood, if we really manage the way we are all wanting to do. That means that before the standardization requests, we'll have already some exchanges between the European Commission, the political world, and the standardization one, so that the ESOs will be able to gather the expertise, to begin to exchange, and to be ready for when the standardization request is there to really go for the work. So I really think that, yes, we can accelerate thanks to the improvements that we are together proposing today.
Thank you, Frederic. The next question by Matthias Krempel is about the Green Deal. And Matthias asks, the time frame for getting the Green Deal done is less than 30 years. This budget includes the time for the production of standardization frameworks, communicating them to standardization experts, producing the standards, approving them, and implementing and applying them. For instance, getting them into the heads and hands of the standards users. How many of these work loops do you think can be fit into the time frame available? And are you confident to reach the necessary impacts with the regimes you discussed today? When?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were clear enough on the fact that we're very conscious of our priorities being green, digital, or resilience. Actually, I did not mention it, but the standardization package includes 4 elements: the strategy, the legal, technical amendments on governance, sort of a periodic report. But the 4th element is the annual union work program. And if you have some curiosity to look at the annual work program, you will see that this year, for the first time, it actually implements what is announced in strategy in terms of prioritization. So it's quite clear that our efforts will be actually to align our standardization request in our work program with the priorities. And of course, the priorities will be oriented towards the Green Deal, towards digitalization, the digital decade, and towards resilience. So what I can tell you is not a guarantee that we'll succeed in doing everything, but the guarantee that it will be prioritized and that we'll do all efforts to have the standards we need, because we can't afford not to have.
Ian Will asks, the overall budget has been increased, but for next year, only 90 days are allocated for construction product regulation harmonized standards, compared to 495 last year, and still it wasn't enough. Does it mean revisions have to be stopped until the SRs following the publication of the revised CPR are themselves issued?
Can take that one.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, one is to realize that last year, a substantial share of the House budget was dedicated to the work for construction products. And at the moment where we have to look at efficiency of Commission spending, while having made all efforts to increase the budget of us consultants, and then I think we were successful increasing it by 55%, we've also have to look at where this budget produces results. I'm afraid that in construction sector, last year, despite all these funds spent on us consultants, they did not allow for a citation of a lot of standards, not to say of any standard. Therefore, I mean, it's also the responsibility of the Commission not to pour money into something which is not producing results, in particular when you've got sectors where basically standards that can be set. So we had to have a look at that. We're also taking into consideration the fact that the construction products regulation is foreseen to be revised. Actually, the Commission proposal for a revised construction products regulation is expected for the 30th of March. I don't comment myself on that date. It doesn't mean that the work on the present one has to stop, but we also have to take into consideration that we need results against the money that is being spent.
I would like to elaborate a little bit on that. I think Federico has also given a reply about the figures, which I think is very useful. Just to mention the efforts that we are making in SEN in order to work on what we call pilots in conjunction with the Commission desk officers in designing those models, so templates of standards in the construction sector that have got particular requirements that can lead to citation. And even if it has again taken a long time, my understanding is that we are getting there. So it means that we may see more citation of standards in the construction sector. And also my understanding also that is that we are reaching some progress on the issuing of a standardization request to update the requirements, which was something that was extremely relevant to get a standard cited for the construction sector. So this is a little detail, but it's a sector that is indeed taking a lot of energy, but we are also making efforts in order to progress on that.
I concur with you, Elena, that we're doing a lot of efforts to improve the situation.
May I add that we really appreciate the improvements that are made in the new contract of the consultants, which should really ease the early assessment of standards, and as early as possible. It's a message to the standardization community. We should really use this to assess the standards as early as possible to make the things a lot easier for the last stages. And secondly, the fact that there will be a vertical and horizontal coherence. I saw that in the chat there were also questions on that. There are increase in the budget of CHS consultant contract in order to make this coherence, which is absolutely key for the standardization world. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. We still have a few minutes for questions. I don't know if there is something that needs to be picked up. No, nothing. Okay, tell me from the.
Yes. There was a question, I think, from Wim. You replied, okay. And Mete also, who was very active in our previous.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, it's about hydrogen. Yeah. This is one of the questions that emerged after the presentation on hydrogen, which is from Mete Pet's show. I hope I pronounce your name decently. Given the case of hydrogen and the development of standards in this area, do we depend on voluntary participation of industry representatives to drive the work from here and pay the development? And is this model seen as the way forward financing in other urgent areas?
Well, I can reply that well, this is the way we work. We work on the voluntary participation of industry representatives in the standard development. Of course, I think that when there is industry, but first of all, and I would like also to mention a comment that I saw in the chat from Pauline. We need to engage and motivate the experts. Without experts and without industry, no standards. And that is something that need to be clear for everybody. And maybe also Frederick, who is our chair of the Senelec Technical Board, can elaborate on that. But indeed, what is important is that we have industry, that industry see the added value of working in the standardization committees. And I would like to make the link with the strategy, because what we see in the European standardization strategy is a really wake-up call to industry representatives and in general to all the experts in Europe to take standardization seriously, to understand the benefits of standardization and to engage in the standards making process. And I think that is a win-win for industry, because of course, when there is industry participating is because there is a return on investment. And I'm not an industry representative, but maybe you can elaborate on that. And also it's a benefit for the whole economy and the whole society.
Yeah, I'm actually not extremely worried in these new priority areas where basically it's very often industry and other stakeholders that actually insist on the need to have standards. So the motivation is there. And when the motivation, the interest, and as you say, Elena, the return on investment is foreseeable, I don't think there's much obstacle for participation of industry. Actually, on the contrary, there is motivation.
Okay.
I can just confirm that the importance of having all the stakeholders engaged, including the industry. And obviously, the industry it's always difficult when you are far from the market, the reality, to engage people and to engage time of experts, etc. So it's key that we collectively make this attractive for a lot of people. Research institute, as you mentioned already, and experts, etc., and as early as possible, so that we create the trust on the market that is really needed in order to make things a success.
Thank you, Frederick. I see that there is another question. We just came from Thomas Grasso. So Thomas says, this was only about the inside EU strategy, how to make SR from ESO without having a look at the competition. Who in standardization worldwide, US and Asia, is already working on these targeted Green Deal technologies? Which available products and technologies already set the standard without being standardized and are faster than standardization because they need to earn money with their developments, I think. Who is the right partner to gain speed in standardization at less effort and to ensure that our own industry is not lost and also front running?
The question is for you.
Yeah. I mean, basically, that's the type of thing that we have to be looked at as Commission together with the stakeholders in terms of the analysis of the situation and what you're doing in terms of mapping for standards. We also have to do a mapping as far as the overall situation is concerned. By the way, when we launch an initiative like hydrogen or batteries, is that we have some analysis of what the situation is already. This being said, because I see a sort of connotation in the question of the need to go fast, I agree with the need to go fast. I agree with the need to take into account what exists on the global scene. This being said, there are issues where we also have to make sure that our values are respected, our European values. So to be fast and to be global is fine, and that's of course unchanged in terms of our general approach, but we don't want to compromise our values for this purpose.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're good. Thanks for all of those who have asked questions. It was really an interesting debate and a good opportunity to go more in depth in some relevant issues. Now, I would like to move to the last part of this workshop, which is after having taken stock of what the task force has been doing until now. Now it is a time to look forward and talk a bit about the next steps. So for this last part, I would like to ask Elena and Gwen to answer to two questions from my side. The first question would be, can you explain what the next steps will be and what we should expect from the upcoming months regarding the task force? Who wants to start?
And as far as the task force is concerned, I think the next steps are quite obvious. I mean, from the presentation we made, there was slight next items. So we basically have to continue the work so that we cover the whole issues that we identified. We're basically halfway of the process, I would imagine, now, and we have to work on the second half so that we improve the situation. As far as the strategy is concerned, then the strategy is a policy paper indicating the work streams we intend to work upon. And of course, the next step will be implementation of all those work streams. But not everything can be done tomorrow, but we're conscious of the urgency to act on it.
Okay. So also for the task force, we are thinking about working on an action plan. That is something that we discussed and actually was announced for the task force. The idea would be, our objective here is to have it available in May. There's still a lot of work to do, I must say, although it's true that we are now working at a reasonable speed regarding the remaining part of the process. Ideally, we would like to have this action plan available in May, and also to work on this pilot, so that to test the case of what we are producing. So this is, I think this is very tangible, and I do hope, and I will do my best to progress on that. I also would like to thank all the task force members, because I know that we have a lot of regular meetings and spend a lot of time, and it has been a very hectic period for all of us. Regarding the implementation of the strategy, I also would like to elaborate. I don't know, maybe Neviana also later would like to complement, but we would like to really contribute to the implementation of the strategy. So we are looking into all the actions that have been more in detail that have been included. We are connecting those actions with the current projects that we are running, with potential new projects that we may need to implement. And for that, of course, we will consult with the Senate community, so to make sure that we take into account all the parties and all the experts that are very, very generously devoting their time to the work of standards development.
Thanks. I was communicated from our colleagues that there have been 2 late questions. So 3 actually. Okay, so I propose we take a step back, we answer these questions, and then we conclude with the final question I prepared. So the first one comes from Wim Bekezel, and it's how will we ensure the coherence of European standards with the international ones when having to comply with all HES consultant comments related to European legal aspects, which are not necessarily acceptable to non-European experts?
Yeah, perhaps I can take that, some of that one. I like the end of that question, that our legal requirements are not always acceptable to non-European experts. Yeah, but if standards were to be proposed for citation as harmonized standards that would not fit with our legal requirements, they would not be acceptable to the European Commission and to our legislators. So let's be clear on that. So then how we ensure that it's actually part of the process we want to involve as well, is that basically the legal elements that are necessary to be taken into consideration for compatibility of potential harmonized standards with the legislation are actually well understood by standardizers participating in the global standardization efforts, so that we are not confronted or less often confronted to a situation where basically the work being done at the international standardization level is done in disconnection with what our legal requirements would be, so that would allow us to better integrate or to more easily integrate the work done at the international level, if it comes in and is compatible with the work we've got, with the legal requirements we've got for our legislation.
Okay, I would like to elaborate. I know Wim for many years now, so I think he knows what I'm going to say. We have a unique system in Europe. I say that very often, and I say that also to ISO and to IEC. So we have a system in which our standards give market access. So if you apply a standard, and in the Senelec case, to a high percentage of standards that have been developed at international level. So if you comply with the standard, you get access to 600 million consumers to the single market. And first of all, I think it would be extremely useful that other regions of the world would have a similar process in which you could work in one place to develop the technical solution and then get access to the market. And I'm just referring to the model. My second comment here is that I think maybe what we need to do also at European level is to coordinate better the positions of the experts, so that when we engage in the international standardization activities, and I understand that sometimes some requirements may not be accepted, but I think that we can improve the efforts that we make at coordinating all the experts in the international committee, so that we can work at international level to address the requirements to get to the single market, but also to other markets in the world. And that is something, also a message that I got from the strategy, which I think is very important that we look at. I think it's beneficial for everybody.
Okay, thank you both. Then we have a question from Giovanna Longo, who says that she comes from the industry, and until a couple of years ago, she was happy of the system. Then she says, now I start to really doubt that the system of harmonized standards is still a good one. The role of the has and the broken process to get the standard harmonized create delays that are not sustainable. We do not see that the system is transparent and we are losing faith in the system. Are the ESOs and the European Commission aware of this?
Aware of your lose of faith in the standardization process, I'm not, but I mean, the fact that we have had some difficulties, yes. The thing, I mean, perhaps we need a bit of history there, and I don't want to prolong that too long, but we have a European Court of Justice's judgment that reminded us that for harmonized standards, they give presumption conformity to the European legislation. From that point of view, they are quasi-legislation. And from there, there is a responsibility, particular of the director in charge of the legislation concerning Commission, when it decides to publish harmonized standards, because it's quasi-legislation. And therefore, we have to be sure that they are compatible with the essential requirements that are in the legislation. That's as simple as that. That's a legal responsibility. So the HAS consulting system was actually developed in order to help that process, to help basically to face that responsibility that the court imposes on us. I mean, it's basically not a choice or it's not individual officials who decided to be difficult suddenly. What we are now doing with the task force is what we're trying to smoothen the process, because we realized that it didn't work all the times as smoothly as we would wish, and that's what we're working upon. But the principle is there, basically, a harmonized standard, in order to be cited in the official journal, has to be compatible with the law, because it's quasi-legislation. It gives presumption conformity to the law.
If I may complete, yeah. Giovanna, stay with us. We are working. We are working hard, because indeed we are aware. I think that Gwen has put it very nicely. We have gone through a difficult process where actually the information maybe did not flow in the way it should. And also there were new processes and procedures and new check-ins that change suddenly the way we work. And we really are making all efforts possible in order to support the experts. I think, Frederic, you also wanted to...
Yeah, may I say the word? As you know, I am an industry representative, and obviously it's for us also very important to have this process working efficiently. And yes, to find at the end of the day the results of all the efforts that the industry is putting in standardization. You are absolutely right. But we have also to consider how important it is to continue to have this link between standards and regulations, so that the regulations are closer to the market needs and closer to the technologies. That's the only way to make to have these discussions. It's really key to have regulations close to the reality also. So it's really a win-win situation, and I think we really have to make this work and not to try to find another way. And by the way, it's interesting for the authorities, because they can make market surveillance a bit more efficient, and it's key for everybody, and especially the industry, to have market surveillance efficient. It's also a good way for presumption of conformity. So we can obviously elaborate, but I think that we should try to make our best to make this NLF works, either the EC and us, and to avoid this administrative burden that we could face sometimes, and to go ahead of it to make Europe stronger on the international market. But obviously open to discuss with Giovanna as she wants.
Yes, and if I may add as well, it's difficult to stay motivated when you see a lot of challenges in the process. And with the presentations today, we have shown what are the discussions which we have currently. The HAS system is on the table, and we are currently discussing what we can do in order to improve on both sides the assessment of standards or to have them successfully cited after publication and adoption. So there is still a lot to be done in terms of education for technical officers, experts, how to do the standard setting in a way that at the end the outcome will be positive after the assessment, and we will have really created a standard on a timely basis, which is quickly cited at the end after publication. That's the overall goal, and I also would like to support what Frederick said. Also, the overall goal is to preserve the NLF, because I'm also coming from the industry, and we all know that this is the easiest way when we have standards, harmonized standards, to comply or to use the presumption of conformity for compliance with European legislation. So let's stay motivated and continue our work in standard setting, and of course try to improve our better communication, to improve the inclusiveness, the discussions with the national standards organizations to achieve our overall goal. Thank you.
If you will allow me to pass a comment on that, it's work ahead of us, but we have to be conscious as well that it's a challenging one, because in the technical committees we've got fantastic people as far as the engineering is concerned, and we have to reconcile that with people who are as fantastic but are dealing with the law, and that's a challenge between lawyers and engineers. Don't automatically speak the same language.
Okay. I see that there is a question specifically for Elena from Thomas Dietrich.
Yes, I don't think I'm going to answer this question. I first of all, we did upgrade the Senate website. So I suggest that you send me a message. I will get you in contact with our team. Maybe there is a particular issue that we need to exchange, because we have done some trainings and I understood that all these problems were solved, but I take these things very seriously. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, and let's take this on site regarding the access to the Senelec documents and the IC on the Senelec website.
Okay. Martin Chapman asks a humorous question. Can the Commission write common technical specifications better than all the stakeholders in the standardization system?
It's humor, so I laugh.
Okay, very good.
But well, I think that it's humorous, but I think that we can elaborate a little bit on that. Because it's true that in the strategy we have this. This is just something that I would like to put on the table. I have had some exchanges with Wen about this in the past, and it may happen that there is a very urgent political need to develop a specification, and I'm not going to enter into the discussions of better or worse as Martin was proposing. But something that we would like to bring to the attention of the Commission and to consider is that, okay, if that is the case, if you develop a specification that is not done in the process that we know from the ESOs, let's consider that as a pre-normative exercise that can be brought to the channel of the European standardization system, to the ESOs that can maintain and update that. And again, this is not something that we have agreed or discussed in the task force, but it's something that I think is worth it to give a try.
So in that case, in order to go on the humorous question, and I will just comment, is basically that developing technical specifications as far as the Commission is concerned is not a dream. First, even if it was a dream, the sheer amount of resources we've got, human resources we've got in the Commission, I'm not sure that we would be allowed to live our dream. So, but it's not even our dream. This being said, we can be confronted to situations where we are particularly urgent needs, or we have it. And I want it to be nice today, but we have had examples where basically unacceptable delays existed before delivery standards. There are still concrete examples of that. I mean, up to 12 years in certain cases. or that it's impossible to get a standard that actually fits to our legislation or to our objectives. And in those cases, one has to be honest. As a public authority, the public authority cannot remain without any means in order to have its legislation being applied, implemented. So it's considered as a fallback approach, and that's certainly not the priority that we would have to say, but we as a public authority need this fallback approach.
Okay. Thanks. I think maybe it's time to move on with the conclusion.
Yes.
Or okay, so
I think so.
now I ask the second question, which basically today we've heard a lot of things. We have heard some examples about the pilots. We have heard how the strategy goes together with the work with task force. We've heard very interesting things about the work stream 2. How will all the things we have heard today be taken into consideration in the upcoming work of the 2 task force work streams? Elena, do you want to start?
Well, this is the purpose of the workshop, as it was the purpose of the first one, to collect input. I mean, we had more questions than suggestions. I think that we also would like to hear some proposals from the stakeholders. I think that the ESOs, but also the Commission, we're open if you have got any idea about a way to that can help us to work on these innovative processes. We take into account all the examples that we have in our systems. We bring those examples for discussions in order to address challenges. As Neviana was also mentioning, this can be a little bit frustrating. I hope that this workshop also generates some hope, because as I said, we are putting a lot of energy here, and our objective is to continue listening to all the stakeholders, to continue taking into account those comments, and doing our best with the means that we have to get the European standardization system to the strategic level that it deserves. And for that, it needs to work well, as we said at the beginning. So we will indeed, we have all the chat, we have the recording of the workshop. We'll go back, we will look into that, and if we can find also a good ideas that we need to consider, we will do that.
Okay, and when?
Yeah, a lot of the questions or the comments we got today were actually linked to various elements that we raised in the strategy, like prioritization, our priorities, our policy priorities, our standards work with that, the global dimension, inclusiveness, etc. But it's to be clear, all that can only work if the system works. And that's what we've been trying to do with the task force. I think that if we can convince you that basically we're working hard on it, we've made progress. I mean, we're not only working hard, we have made progress. We're not there yet, but we have made progress. And we certainly have a constructive atmosphere for work. So basically, we want to do more progress so that we actually finish the work of the task force and have concrete measures for improvement of the system, so that we actually can be better in pursuing all our other objectives, which I mentioned earlier. So basically, I think it's, if we only can convince you of that, and if you've got fantastic ideas, don't hesitate to send them to us so that we can consider them.
Yes.
Okay, thanks a lot for your answer. I think that we can conclude today's workshop. I think it was a very interesting moment, a good occasion for transparency. And I thank the 2 co-chairs, so Gwen Cosegu and Elena Santiago Cid, all our panelists that follow us online, so Henning Ehrenstein, Bernard Gendreau, Frédéric Vaillant, and Neviana Nikolowski. And I thank all the participants that followed us today, and also that sent some very interesting questions. And yeah, of course. And then our Els and Alberto, our colleagues at Sen and Senelec, who did all their amazing work of support and organizing this event, and also like who provided the technical support to make this event possible today. So thanks a lot to all of you, and see you in the coming months.
And to Giovanni also.
Thanks a lot.